Good evening. Welcome to the Midtown Ventura Community Council virtual candidate forums on September 10th, 2020. I'm Dan Long, chair of the Midtown Ventura Community Council, and tonight we were hosting 3 candidate forums. Midtown Ventura Community Council members are all volunteers, and we are dedicated to the preservation, enhancement, and revitalization of the Midtown area. We strive to have a positive influence as change happens in our community and to educate citizens of those changes taking place. Our public meetings bring presenters to speak about relevant issues in Ventura. All 3 forums this evening are being recorded, which will air later on CAPS. Tonight, before we begin, I wanted to extend our great appreciation to our volunteer administrator, Greg Mansfield, who has spent countless hours working to produce all 3 professional forums this evening. Greg Mansfield is an editor for 2 Powerboat magazines, a contributing editor to Speed News, and provides corporate communications for major events. A couple other notes. The MVCC board is honoring all the work over the last 100 years by the League of Women Voters by donating a check to their organization. And also another note, there will again be a flag raising ceremony tomorrow morning at all local fire stations at 6:55 in the morning to honor the anniversary of 9/11. If you plan to go, you must wear a mask, practice social distancing, and there will be no firehouse tours tomorrow. And last up tonight is the Ventura City Council forum for District 3. With that, I'm very happy to introduce David Maron, our moderator this evening. David moderates many forums for the League of Women Voters. David?
Thank you, Dan. And actually, I'm a member of the League of Women Voters as well. Dan, thank you for all your work. Pamela, John, the whole team at MVCC for putting this on. So we will get started. Audience, welcome. This is our last presentation tonight. We're going to go for about 4.5 hours. No, I'm only kidding. We're just going to go for 1 hour. And we're going to hear from the 3 candidates that are running for District 3. The other candidate was unable to join us tonight. That was Will, I believe is his name. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about how this works. We're going to go through 1.5 minutes for each candidate for their opening statements, and we randomly assign those numbers. Barbara Brown will go first, followed by Aaron Gaston, and then Mike Johnson. At the end of the evening, we'll reverse the order. For anybody who is listening online, as Dan said, this will be available later for subsequent viewing if you want to share with your friends. We'll go ahead and get started. And up first is Barbara Brown. You have 1 minute, 30 seconds.
I'm David, Greg, Heather, and the Midtown Community Council for hosting this event. As a 44-year Venturan, I want to give back to the community I love. My husband and I brought up our son here, embracing that sense of community that living here provides. I want to maintain quality of life. As president and board member of the Ventura Botanicals for over 12 years, I worked with some of the best and brightest in Ventura, making this visionary dream happen. I believe in serving our most vulnerable as well. I worked with Interface Children and Family Services, Ventura County's most comprehensive nonprofit provider of social services. I also serve Goodwill Industries, which provides vocational and educational opportunities for economic justice. Having lost my home in the Thomas Fire, I care deeply about those still without a home and will fight to overcome the challenges they face. Lastly, we have a general plan. As the founder of a 25-year-old business, I have a fiscal background working with startups and established corporations, managing and balancing budgets. As part of my work, I had to absorb a lot of information quickly, then make thoughtful, strategic decisions. The general plan is both strategic and tactical, and it's very important to be knowledgeable on the issues, but it's also as important to have high collaboration and communication skills, experience, understanding, and vision, because that's what the general plan is all about.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Aaron Gaston. Stand by a second, Aaron. Go ahead and start over, Aaron.
No problem. Thank you for having me, everyone. My name is Aaron Gaston. I'm a Ventura native. I was raised down in the Pierpont Beach, and my parents lived in the same house for 52 years. I went to Pierpont Elementary, Sheridan Way, Cabrillo Middle School, Ventura High School, Ventura Community College right down the street here, and then graduated from UCSB, where I started a technology company developing products for people with disabilities to access computers. Shortly after graduating, my business partner and I were both from Ventura, and we moved the company to our offices in Ventura, in Midtown Ventura, in fact, and we had it there for almost 30 years. After retiring from my technology business, I joined my mom in selling real estate for Berkshire Hathaway locally here, and I'm glad to be partners with her. I envision, and I'm running for city council because I want to have the same, I want my children to have the same opportunities that Ventura has given me. I have a 20-year-old daughter at UCSB and a freshman a daughter at Chico, and I want them to be able to move back to Ventura, get good paying jobs, be able to afford a home, and have exactly the same opportunities that my family did, my parents and my grandparents before them. Being a realtor, I have a front row seat to the housing crisis, and that's a main focus for me. I want to work on affordable housing, moderate housing, as well as executive homes to bring tax revenue to our beautiful city. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Mike Johnson.
Well, thank you, and I'd like to thank the Midtown Community Council for hosting this forum. I'd like to introduce myself to everybody. I'm a high school teacher by trade. I taught U.S. history, government, and economics. I took time off to be a stay-at-home dad, and then my wife had some medical issues and became disabled, so that's been my focus. But over the past 12 years, I've become more and more involved in community issues. I was president of the Poinsettia PTO for 2 years and served on the Anacapa School Site Council. And for 10 years, I've been involved with the College Area Community Council. I had the honor of serving as chair. And for several years now, I've been a regular at City Hall, attending nearly every meeting of the Water Commission, the Economic Development Subcommittee, the Homelessness and Affordable Housing Subcommittee, and the Measure O Oversight Committee. I've been doing this for years, not because I thought I'd be running for council, but just because it's that important to me. And now with district elections and with Matt Levere moving on to the County Board of Supervisors, it's time for me to step up. I want Ventura to be a sustainable and resilient city, a place where a young person can put down roots, where a midlife bankruptcy or a divorce doesn't end in foreclosure or eviction. The city is facing several challenges over the next 4 years, but each is also an opportunity to decide what our future looks like. That's why I'm running. I'd like to earn your support. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to begin with the question number 1, and we'll start with Mike. Mike, you'll be up first for this. So let's just hear a little bit in general from you. If you're elected, what are your top 3 priorities, and how will you actually advance those priorities?
Well, the top 3 priorities for me right now, obviously, we've got the pandemic. I'm a firm believer that when you've got a public health emergency, that you should be listening to doctors for what to do, for guidance. I hope that we're out of this by the time we elect a new council, but I have a feeling it's going to last quite some time. Second would be the housing crisis. I agree completely with Aaron that it's really the long term, it is the most critical issue that our city has to face. We need more housing, both market rate and affordable housing. And then the third would be dealing with our rise in homelessness. So the housing crisis and homelessness, in some ways they go together. We've done a great job putting together the Arch, the new 55-bed shelter with the county's help. But for a 55-bed shelter to work, when we've got 550 people at least on the streets, they need to be able to move out of the shelter and into something else. And so that's going to mean that we've got to really focus on affordable housing. We need it for our workforce, we need it for economic development, and we need especially affordable housing at the extremely low income level so that we can get a handle on homelessness. So many of the people that are experiencing homeless right now work full time and they're just struggling to find a place to live. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron, same question to you. What are your top 3 priorities and how will you advance them if elected?
Yeah, my 3 top priorities are number 1, the economy, number 2, housing, and number 3, public safety. And I don't think these are interchangeable. I think they're all connected. We need a robust economy here in Ventura. As Mike has mentioned, we're in quite a predicament with COVID and being about $11 million deficit coming up this next fiscal year. Sorry, my dog's in the background. And then the second is our housing issue. So again, what I mentioned before, being in a housing predicament, We not only need affordable housing, but we need moderate housing and executive housing. I know executive housing to some people is a dirty word, but the fact is when we have CEOs that live here, they are involved in our economy, they donate their time, their kids go to school here, and that encourages a robust economy. And third, public safety. Public safety has to be one of the top priorities. We have to have boots on the ground. We have to have police and fire in less than 5 minutes to our door. And I would not be in favor of defunding the police. I would be in favor of putting in another fire station to decrease response times. And so those are my 3 priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara, we'll wrap up this question with you. What are your top priorities and how will you advance them?
Well, I have 3 priorities. Of course, COVID, getting, 3, COVID, homelessness, and water in the environment. Critical to both the health and safety of our community is mitigating the traumatic impacts of COVID and making plans for the future. That's of unqualified importance. I intend to focus on how we can assist businesses and those without a paycheck impacted by this pandemic, engaging leaders as much as we can in problem-solving solutions through collaboration. We want to open up opportunities to assist both small businesses and larger concerns to flourish. We want to use every possible tool we can to make this pandemic have as minimal as an impact as it can from this point forward. Secondly, homelessness continues to be an issue. My husband was a Ventura County firefighter. My son is a paramedic. Major part of what they do is take care of the homeless. I worked on the Interfaith Children Family Services Board of Directors, which is the largest, most comprehensive social services it provides social services for our community. And then lastly, water and the environment. Clean water comes from a clean environment, and green spaces is part of that. I worked on the first non-taxpayer community-funded open space in Ventura. I support the Ventura Land Trust and then Ventura. Yes,
thank you. For our audience, just remind them that this is District 3. There is no incumbent. There are 4 candidates running, including William Cornell, who was unable to participate tonight. And so just remind them with that. Aaron, we're going to start the next question with you. In some of your opening statements from you candidates and in the responses, you've talked about housing. So let's dig into that a little bit. What is your view on how to increase available housing in Ventura, especially when we look at issues that are often raised, such as the water needs, traffic, parking, schools? Please share with us how you're going to unravel this difficult problem.
Housing is obviously a very complicated problem in all the state, especially here in Ventura. We have SOAR that we have until 2050. I love our preserved lands, and I think that we should be supporting that. I think that we need to find ways that we can incorporate areas of Ventura where we can build the far west end. I would be in support of possibly annexing some of that property back into the city limits and building some both moderate and affordable housing out there. Obviously, infill. I'm a big supporter of infill projects when they're done properly. I think that decreases traffic in most cases because a lot of people are working from home, walkability, bicycling to downtown, Midtown corridor. So I think we can increase a lot of moderate income and even executive, low income and executive housing with just doing some of these infill projects. I love what they're doing down on Front Street. I think that's going to be fantastic. And then we can look at some of the things within the limits of SOAR of providing some space for senior housing. We can provide some space for low income housing and just simply increase some density and do a lot more live work situations in the downtown and Midtown corridor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, same question to you about how would you actually achieve results here with increasing available housing in Ventura, especially with all of the challenges I mentioned earlier?
Well, to start with the challenges, water, there's a good news and a bad news. I think, after spending so much time at the Water Commission over the last several years, we have a handle on water. We're going to have more water. It's going to be expensive, but I feel confident that we've got the water to handle the development. Traffic and parking are definitely going to be an issue. We see this right now with the proposal at Goodman and Phil. It's an affordable housing development. We need it so badly. It's 120 units. The residents around there are concerned about the impact it's going to have on parking and traffic. It's 120 units. It has to follow only the state rules on parking, so I think it's only about 105 parking spaces. So one of the ways we deal with that will be with coming up with an active mobility plan, which will be part of our general plan update, which we'll have done in 2023. We've got to be a city where you don't have to have a car to get around town. It's got to be easier for a married couple to share one car. But then the other thing too about the Goodman Phil project is it just we have to make sure that it's compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. And that's why I'm in favor of keeping the design review committee. I would oppose disbanding the DRC. And as for schools, unfortunately, the school district is seeing declining enrollment. So we really need families to come in, because that's going to be a real problem for our school district if we don't fix our demographic balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara, same question to you. What are your plans to address the affordable housing?
Well, one thing I know for sure, I've been talking to a lot of Venturans in the last few weeks. And one thing I know for sure is they don't want large housing developments. They don't want 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 story developments that will overwhelm the community. They want developments that make sense for Ventura, that enhance what we already have. Most of the people I talk to love Ventura and only want improvements here. We do need affordable housing, and infill does make sense for us. We've had a huge paradigm shift now with people working at home. So one of the, there's a lot of good things about working at home. We have a decrease in traffic, so we've got a reduction there. We've got, people can bicycle, they can take breaks and go downtown or Midtown, or, even on the East End, there's lots of places to have lunch. Walkable space is great, and people are very interested in doing that. So I think we definitely want affordable housing. We need low income housing, transitional housing. And yes, I also agree that we need some executive housing. We have many nonprofits in this community and very few donors. So we want to make sure that we have a balanced community, low income, middle income, high income, so that our nonprofits can help our community and our underserved.
Thank you. Barbara, we'll stay with you and start the next question. Many of the things require a healthy economy. So what would be your strategy to grow the economy in Ventura? And that includes, how would you create good jobs that are high paying for locals, and yet still preserve the quality of life in Ventura?
Well, I know the pat answer is to draw new business here. And as a business owner who had a business here, a successful business here for 25 years, I always felt like we were ignoring the resources that we already have. And when you think about it, Patagonia, the trade desk, there are a number of very successful businesses here that we could assist to continue to grow. Making opportunities for them, new permitting easier, encouraging our employees to come from the community. I mean, I'm very interested in attracting new businesses, but honestly, historically, it's always growing businesses here that have worked better for us.
Thank you. Aaron, same question to you. What are your strategies to grow the economy, create good jobs?
Yeah, so I actually think that we can do a better job soliciting businesses to relocate to our city. One of the things when you talk to business leaders outside of the city of Ventura, other places in Ventura County, they'll say that, well, Ventura historically is a terrible place to do business because it's tough to get anything done when they go to the city. It's been my experience, and it's been my brother's experience owning multiple businesses here in Ventura, that when you walk into City Hall and you want to get something permitted or done, it's like sweaty palm time, and you get nervous going in there because you never know what the answer is going to be. You get a different answer from everyone in there. So I think looking at the matrix plan and implementing some of the streamlining and making our city more welcoming for builders and for people that want to bring their businesses to town, I think that's one strategy. I think I agree with Barbara, nurturing companies like the Trade Desk. I think Ventura is doing a great job at that. I'm concerned that we had this wonderful incubator that created a company like Trade Desk, and it's just disappeared out of the city of Ventura. I know it's relocated outside of the city, but I'd like to see something along those lines back in the city, and let's double down on another company like Trade Desk and get those homegrown companies to be here and nurture and keep them here. And as well, get the housing so that those executives don't move out of the area like that's happened with the Trade Desk. Thank you.
Mike, we'll wrap up, same question with you. What is your view and strategies to grow the economy and create good paying jobs?
Well, I think the trick to attracting good paying jobs is just to attract jobs as best you can. And that means being a place where people can live and work and have a good quality of life. It means, you know, being a place where young adults can put down roots, start their careers here and stay and be a stable community. You know, we talked about the Trade Desk. It's now a $20 billion company. They've got offices all over the world, but they're keeping their headquarters here in Ventura. They're bringing in hundreds of new jobs to downtown. They like downtown Ventura, and that's where they want to be. But what powers downtown Ventura? What makes it so attractive? Well, it's restaurants and locally owned shops. It's Anacapa Brewing Company and Foxvine Jewelry. You attract those good paying jobs by being a sustainable and resilient community. And what I've heard from business owners at the Economic Development Subcommittee is that the biggest impediment we face in job growth is the tight housing market, the high cost of living. As Aaron said, the matrix report, we've got to get that implemented. I agree with him completely on that. It's long overdue. It's been too difficult for too long for people to get certain projects going. It shouldn't take years for these things to happen. Thank you.
Okay, and Michael, we'll stay with you. And here's a question I usually don't get asked in the other cities, but Ventura's got special character, and I'm not surprised to see this one. It's about the city planning process, and specifically the roles of the Design Review Committee, the Historic Preservation Committee, even the way the planning commissioners are chosen by individual city council members. So share with our audience your thoughts on the city planning process. Are there things you would change, or do you think it's working well?
Okay, let me make a note here. Is it working well? Honestly, it's very hard to say because everything is in flux right now. We have new state legislation, SB 300 in particular, which has really changed what we can do. As we've talked about, there's the matrix report, which was delivered to council in November and then adopted in, I think, February. And then the pandemic started. So before we even really got started on the matrix report, there was an emergency resolution which lasts for a year, which again changes our design review process. Right now it's in flux. I like having the Design Review Committee and the Historic Preservation Committee. Some people want to disband them. I do not. I think it's important that we have, for example, with the DRC, these local architects who are willing to volunteer their time to make sure that projects are compatible with their neighborhood. The matrix report does not suggest getting rid of the DRC or the HPC. It suggests giving them some more training, maybe changing the scope of what they do, but I think that's important. And with SB 300, you know, a housing project, for example, can only have 5 public hearings, so it can't be stuck in design review hell anymore. As for the planning commissioners, I think it was an interesting change. I look forward to, if I win, being able to appoint a planning commissioner. I hope that the city council will try not to micromanage the planning decisions so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron, same question to you. What are your thoughts about the city planning process, specifically the Design Review Committee, Historic Preservation Committee, and the appointment of commissioners to the Planning Commission?
Yeah, I have no problem with the DRC and the HPC being on a consulting type basis. I don't agree with giving them as much power as sometimes we've seen in the past. You know, like the 40-year rule, you want to switch out your windows here in the city of Ventura if your house is over 40 years, which, you know, I'm guessing here where it's about 70% of our construction. I live in a house that was built in the 50s. I have to go down there and pull a permit, and it could go through historical design review for switching out windows. I think that that's a flaw in the system, and I would like to see that fixed. Again, that's part of the matrix plan, and that's one of the reasons why I support that plan and getting that implemented as quickly as possible. So I'm not opposed to any of those committees. In fact, I would support having them on a kind of a consulting basis. I just want to see the city get more streamlined and more customer service oriented, so people go in there with a smile on their face and think that they're going to get the job done. Thank you.
Thank you. So Barbara, same question to you. What is your thoughts on the city planning process?
Well, probably more than anyone, I have experience with the permitting process, having just moved into my Thomas Fire rebuild about a month ago. The permitting process was streamlined for Thomas Fire rebuilds, and I think it worked really well. There are some things that I would continue to streamline to make the process even a little bit faster. I totally agree with many of the components of the Matrix Consulting report. However, with regard to the Historic Preservation Committee and the Design Review Committee, you know, our general plan talks a lot about community engagement, and that is one door where our community engages, you know, one-to-one with City Council. Many of our leaders come from commissions. I was a public art commissioner myself. It's how you learn about the community and how you communicate what you learn to everyone else. So we have, you know, the HPC and the DRC are people who are donating their time. They're usually professionals, and they are people that are willing to donate their time in order to make Ventura a more beautiful place. So I support the HPC and the DRC. I do agree they need guidelines, but I believe they might work better as a recommending committee.
Thank you. Barbara, I'm going to stay with you and shift gears a little bit. Ventura, we learned a lot of lessons about the Thomas Fire and issues with emergency services, water issues. We learned about evacuation problems on the west side. Even though you're elected in District 3, you represent the whole city. So tell us, what would you do to improve the city's emergency preparedness following the Thomas Fire and other events?
Well, first, let me say I want to thank our police and fire departments for the very difficult job that they had. A wildfire is a wildfire. That's why they call it that, and it's something that's completely out of the control, you know, out of everyone's control. I think Chief Schindler has made a strategic plan that addresses a lot of the issues. I think continued vigilance, you know, I know a lot of my neighbors and the people that are rebuilding, as they hear about the fires in Northern California, they are packing. You know, that's how serious it is. I know that, you know, the generator issue that we had in Ondulando, I think that's been addressed. I think the city's paying very close attention to the fact, well, our fire and police department is paying very close attention to the fact that this could happen again, and we want to be more prepared than we were last time. I therefore, you know, support the police and fire. I do believe we need, I believe in the roving mobile unit. I think it increases response time, and I also believe that we need to, you know, lastly, these are really good jobs. When we talk about good jobs in our community, that's this. These jobs are great jobs for people in our community, and we need to support police and fire.
Thank you. Aaron, same question to you. What are some of the things that you would do to improve the city's emergency preparedness?
Yeah, first, I would look at putting in a new fire station down towards the harbor. You know, there's $3 million sitting in an account to go towards that development. And that $3 million goes back to the developer if we don't use it in a certain amount of time. Now, I know that's not enough money to build and staff a firehouse, but I think it's a start, and I think we need to start looking at other ways to do that. The community, the response times is not fast enough. If you talk to both police and fire, they will tell you that, both in police emergencies as well as fire. And also looking at doing some studies on larger developments. Now, I don't necessarily think we need a impact study on every development, but let's say the Kaiser building, that maybe deserved having an impact study done, as well as the Arch homeless shelter, which is a fantastic addition to our community. But that also probably was in need of an impact study, because I know from talking to fire and police that both of that Arch actually has more call outs to it. And, you know, it's not that close to a police and to a fire station. So looking at doing that and reducing the response times.
Thank you. Mike, we'll wrap up this question with you. What are some of the steps you would take to improve city's emergency preparedness?
Well, you know, fortunately last year, and of course, it maybe was a bit late for everything, but the city did hire a new emergency manager, Dan Wall, who is, I believe, in the process of putting together emergency and evacuation plans. He started before the pandemic, and of course, that's been its own emergency. So at the very least, I know it's going to be done before the general plan in 2023. Evacuation routes in particular are important. When you look at, for example, all the units going in around San Juan, it would be great to have a study to say how that would impact evacuation from people in the downtown area. As for, you know, how we would improve some of the preparedness, it's not just fires that we need to think about, but also earthquakes. Fortunately, the water department has done a great job of putting together backup generators and third generators to make sure that we don't have those same kind of problems. But we've also got the State Water Interconnect project coming on. That's going to be a redundant water supply for us, so that if something happens with our water supply, we would have the ability to draw water from the State Water Interconnect. And importantly, you know, that's a $50 million project. We're paying only half because other agencies are benefiting from it, because one of the things it will do is it will provide a sort of county-wide connection, so that if there is a big earthquake, we can send some of our water, we can send some of that east, so that the emergency rooms in Camarillo, for example, can stay open. Thank you.
Thank you. And Michael, we'll go ahead and stay with you for the next question. On the ballot this November, there'll be ballot measures, and that includes one about allowing dispensaries and cultivation of marijuana or cannabis. So what are your positions on the ballot measure?
Well, so voters will be asked whether or not they would support taxing cannabis, and the council has said that if the voters approve the tax, that they will just go ahead and assume that that's okay, that that's approval of retail cannabis. It seems inevitable. I have misgivings, but you know, I think those things can be taken care of in the details. The important thing with retail cannabis is that it follow a conditional use permit, and that we set standards for how the retail operations are going to operate, where they're going to be, what their hours are going to be, the security, the lighting, the signage. And if there are any problems, we'd have the ability, the power to go in and revoke the permit if necessary. One thing I would really like to see, you know, Ventura is a really kind of a drinking town. We have a lot of liquor licenses in this town. I think it would be great if one of the requirements to get a retail cannabis permit would be to acquire and surrender or transform an existing alcohol permit from one of these grandfathered older permits that we don't have the same sort of regulations. Because really, you know, I'm not crazy about marijuana. I'm not crazy about alcohol either. We all have our vices. So thank you.
Thank you. And Aaron, same question to you. What are your positions about the ballot measures and cannabis?
To the economic crisis that we are facing due to COVID, I would look at all opportunities to raise sales tax, and cannabis sales and cultivation and laboratories is part of that plan. So yeah, I do support it, and I support it being regulated. I was at the city council meeting when they were talking about it, and they had the diagrams up there with large circles and, 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, 5,000 feet from schools and public parks. So I support that plan. I believe it's at 1,000 feet now from schools and parks, if memory serves me correctly. I would support that. So I know Ojai put all their dispensaries in one location. I'm not so sure that that's the best route for our city to take. I think that access as well as tax revenue and everything needs to be generated throughout the community. So by having the circles and looking at that study, I think is a benefit to our community. But also I think cannabis has a lot of other benefits, or the industry does, and doesn't have to just be in retail sales. I mean, there's the laboratories and the testing and the edibles and the factories, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for employment. There's the commercial side of it where you hire the unions to build new facilities. So that's my plan.
Thank you. And we'll go ahead and wrap up with you, Barbara.
So, yes, cannabis here is inevitable, but I always wonder, there are a lot of public safety issues when it comes to cannabis with regard to, breaking into cannabis facilities. It's a cash business generally. And I always wonder if the sales tax revenue balances out the cost of police. I know police are not for this. It feels like it encourages crime. I know it happens and has been happening in Ventura regardless, whether it's legal or not. And so in many ways that I'm glad that we're not encouraging illegal behavior. But I do think that, cannabis for medical reasons is important. But again, I just hope that, the money that we're gaining in terms of taxing cannabis does not just go back into public safety, because we have greater problems with, theft and burglary and all that.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next question. We haven't tackled this yet, the environment. And there's quite a few questions related to global climate change, the rising sea levels, the beaches, and also open space, protecting that as well. So Barbara, if we'll start with you, please share with us your thoughts and your policies that you'd like to see implemented to deal with global climate change, to protect the environment within Ventura.
So maintaining high quality air and water, reducing water waste, eliminating one-time plastics, and creating a more bicycle-friendly community to reduce carbon emissions are issues I plan to work tirelessly to resolve. Over the last 2 years, I worked on a bipartisan federal climate change initiative, the carbon fee and dividend legislation. It's HR 763, co-sponsored by Harley Ruda. So I am concerned about sea level rise. I think that we are going to have to build that information into our general plan. Additionally, I am very much pro open spaces. When I first moved here, I envisioned, open spaces gracing the shoulders of Ventura, because I used to drive to Ojai to hike, and that really didn't make sense from a carbon footprint standpoint. So it's one of the reasons I became involved in the Ventura Botanical Gardens. It's the reason I support the Ventura Land Trust and the Rancho San Buenaventura Conservancy Trust.
Thank you. Mike, same question to you about dealing with protecting the environment and dealing with global climate change.
Well, obviously, it's a pretty big topic. As for open space, I agree with Barbara. I especially like our hillsides. I think it's important that we protect it. I'm proud to be endorsed by the Ventura Citizens for Hillside Preservation. Of course, that means more infill. But I think that's a great opportunity, because when we talk about infill, and we're talking about what is essentially more dense housing, we can pair that with a mobility plan so that not everybody is driving around in their own car. We need to expand our bike lanes, for example. We need to become a city where people can walk to work, or they can ride their electric bike downtown. As for Rising sea levels, of course, we've got to continue working with our managed retreat down at the shores. We work with Beacon, with the county, with Fairgrounds, and with the County Watershed Protection District to move the bike path back so that as we have the rising sea levels, we don't lose our infrastructure. They've done a fantastic job with that. And because they've done such a great job with phase 1, that's how we got grant money for phase 2. Let's see. So fortunately, we'll have the climate action plan. It's going to be part of the general plan update in 2023. I'm looking forward to being a part of that. We've really got to make some profound changes in the way we deal with, especially with greenhouse gas emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Aaron, we'll wrap up with you about your strategies to protect the environment.
Sure. Well, since 2013, I've owned 3 electric cars, so I'm obviously a big proponent on renewable energy and alternative vehicles, and I've always been kind of a techie kind of guy, so anything new out, I'm very, very interested in that, and that kind of drove me to buy my first electric vehicle, even though it only went 60 miles to the charge, but I thought it was the right thing to do. I think all 3 of us can agree that, you know, growing urban forests, having open space. This is a community that I live and breathe. You know, I was born here. My parents and I all grew up down at the beach. Obviously, the ocean is very important to us. Living, you know, a few steps from the sand. Sea rise obviously is a big concern. And, you know, I never want to see Ventura's charm change. I don't want to see the hillside being built on. That's why, as Mike said, it's very important to look at the infill. And when we talk about infill, I think a lot of people think of these giant structures in these 5, 6 story, 7 story buildings. I don't think that that's what we're looking for. We're looking for smart growth within an urban environment and somewhere that people can feel proud of living in at all economic levels, and be able to, you know, walk down to the store, walk down to a restaurant, cycle, skateboard. So I think that when we talk about that, I'm afraid people get the wrong impression, think we want these monstrosities and look like Orange County or something. That's definitely not my intention. I would never want to see Ventura change.
Thank you. And Aaron, we'll start with you on the next question. And this is more towards philosophy and just the cultural situation in Ventura. So clearly we've seen across the country since May an upheaval regarding social and racial inequality. And although Ventura has been peaceful, there's clearly a mix and diversity of cultures in the city. So looking at those issues, are there areas that you feel if you're elected, you could address some of these social inequality issues raised by Black Lives Matter and other organizations?
Yeah, you know, I mentioned before, I'm a big proponent in supporting the police and fire. I think that, you know, I think in general, all neighborhoods want more police, not less police. So the defunding the police, I think what's meant by that, and is really meant by that, is, hey, let's look at better training. I think Ventura Police Force is extremely well trained. From my experience, I think what they're lacking in is looking at the diversity of our community and having the equal amount of their police force represented. So I think they do a good job on hiring female officers, and they need to look at expanding those programs. So I'm a father. I have 2 daughters. My wife is Hispanic. My daughters are Hispanic, and so I learn a lot from my wife's childhood and hearing kind of the diversity issues that she had growing up. And so it's always been a learning experience, and it's a generational thing as well. You know, I talked to my 20-year-old daughter that's a junior at UCSB, and she's a feminist studies major, and we have very long conversations, and I learn every day about the needs of our communities. And, you know, I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm always have an open ear and want to listen and change as I mature, even at a 48-year-old. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara, same question to you about how you would address issues raised by groups like Black Lives Matter and other to promote social equality and racial equality.
Well, I believe in economic and social justice. I worked on the boards of Interfaith Children and Family Services, and you know, they provide social services for families in trouble. Goodwill Industries provides vocational training for economic justice. According to a recent Gallup poll, over 85% of Americans don't want to defund police, but there are areas in the US where we need to address these rogue police officers who have racial biases. I have not seen that in Ventura, and I don't believe in punishing everyone for the behavior of, you know, just a small few. I do think, you know, I studied Dr. Philip Gott, who talks about, you know, some of the challenges of training police so that when they're in high adrenaline situations, they train themselves to calm down, to count to 10, so that their immediate reaction doesn't come out of that adrenaline. So, you know, I'm very concerned about my friends and neighbors who feel the oppression of, you know, what's going on in the world, and I'm saddened to see it, and my heart reaches out to them. And, you know, I want to do whatever I can to make sure that America is a quality community with diversity and fairness for everyone.
Thank you. Michael, let's hear your thoughts about how to address some of these issues regarding racial and social equality.
Yeah, so I was proud, my family, that we were able to take part in the big Black Lives Matter protest. I had a student who died of asthma, and he was a Black kid, and it was one of the worst days of my life. But what really got me at the end of it was that this was in San Jose, that it showed up on page, you know, 16 of the San Jose Mercury News that a football player had died of asthma. And then a month or two later, it was a front page story when a white girl died of asthma. And I had students asking me why Daryl didn't get that sort of attention. This has just been such a long, difficult process. And I see my role right now as being one of really listening, of following the leadership of people like Lori Brown and Sofia Rubalcava on issues like this. I don't want to defund the police. Of course, training is always an issue. I think it's great that Chief Schindler is talking about starting a citizens advisory committee of sorts to bring in more voices to deal with some of the policing issues. But, you know, as a country, we've got to do better.
Thank you. Well, candidates, we've reached that part of the evening where we are going to begin closing statements. We've all done a great job. Again, for the audience, William Cornell was unable to be with us tonight, but there are 4 candidates running. Michael, you're going to go first on the closing statements, followed by Aaron, and then we'll wrap up with Barbara. So when you're ready, you have 1.5 minutes.
Well, thank you. You know, the city council really has its work cut out for it. There's the pandemic, the budget crunch, the housing crisis, there's the rise in homelessness, and a $250 million water project, the Water Pure facility. But we have the opportunity here to really decide what we're going to look like in 20 or 30 years. When we come out of the recession, we'll have the opportunity to re-examine our budget priorities. When we submit our housing element to the state in 2021, we'll have the opportunity to make a real commitment to bringing more affordable housing to the city. And when we update our general plan, we'll have the opportunity to create that active mobility plan I talked about so that people aren't spending more and more time in their cars, you know, just sitting in traffic. Also that we can be a city where people can walk to work or, like I said, ride their electric bike downtown to have coffee with their friends. So we'll have the opportunity to develop a flexible and forward-thinking economic development strategy to make sure that we keep our jobs and housing numbers in balance. And we'll have the opportunity to adopt a climate action plan so that we mitigate the effects of climate change while doing our part to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And it's going to be a lot of work. You know, District 3 deserves a council member who is ready to lead on day one. Please visit my website, www.mike4ventura.com, to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Aaron Gaston.
Well, first I want to thank all of you, and I also want to thank my fellow candidates, Mike and Barbara. I appreciate and enjoyed this time with you guys. You know, I've been asked over the year from former council members and current council members to run for city council for probably about 20 years. At the time, my kids were young and I had small businesses that I was running, and I just really didn't feel like I had the time or the energy to put into what it took to be on the city council. I've watched a lot of city council meetings, been to a lot of them. Now it's all online, of course. And, you know, when Matt Levere came to my door about 1.5 years ago, literally knocking and said, you know, I know you've thought about this in the past, that your kids are older. Would you step up and do it? My wife of 24 years and I sat down and had very long conversations over about 4 months. And we decided that the kids were out of the house. It was time for me to step up and actually, instead of just talking about doing it, actually serving my community. I've served on many nonprofit boards over the year. I've been vice president of the Charitable Foundation for the last 5 years, volunteer of the year at the Braille Institute. And that's just the start of it. I love this community. I hope that I earn your vote. I will work tirelessly to do everything I can to listen to my constituents and make you proud to have a voice up there. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next candidate is Barbara Brown.
Well, this is a beautiful city and I'm so proud to be a part of it. I really do want to give back to this community that I love, and the timing is right for me. I know it takes a significant amount of time to be a city council person, and I'm committed to doing that. I have a proven track record of experience and collaboration, working as a commissioner, working in a public-private partnership. I've worked through city processes and requirements and permitting and CEQA and feasibility studies, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, I love this community and I want to enhance it. I think Venturans care about Ventura. They want it to continue to get better. They want any new building to improve the community and not decrease the quality here. And that's why I'm running on quality of life. Everything that I endorse or am excited about has to do with improving the quality of life for Venturans here. Our general plan will shape our city and our children's lives for generations to come. I'm committed to advocating for what's right for Ventura's quality of life, including clean and safe sidewalks, well-maintained streets, beautiful parks, clean beaches, and bike and walking paths. There's a Carlos Santana quote that says, "There's no greater reward than working from your heart and making a difference in the world." And that's one of my favorite quotes.
Thank you, and I wish we could give you all a round of applause, but we are virtual tonight. I want to take a moment to remind the voters about the mail-in ballots. Make sure you sign those. I'd like to thank Greg. I think Greg is probably pretty excited that we got through all 3 of these tonight successfully. Thank you to all the candidates as well. I also want to take a moment to let the audience know that the League of Women Voters will be hosting forums very similar to this for the 3 districts on Tuesday, September 22nd. There'll be information in a few days on our website. Today with the fires throughout the state, we see the smoky and orange colored skies. It reminds us that we should always be grateful to our firefighters, our first responders, and all of our essential workers who are keeping things going during this pandemic. I want to give a big shout out and thank you to all of them. So thank you to the Midtown Ventura Community Council as well. And with that, thank you. I'm David Maron. Good evening.